At the end, we'll have some other paper materials to send around. So one of them will be the evaluation form for this workshop that will be collected, and Monica will use that to inform future opportunities. So welcome to this workshop called Rainbow Church, the Beauty and Value of Open and Affirming Ministries. We welcome you. We want this space and this time together to be one of active listening, one of curiosity, thoughtful questioning. And we're just really glad that you're here to hear more about Open and Affirming Ministries. I will say we're going to do some introductions. We're going to share a presentation with just some information about what it means to be open and affirming and some history around that. And then we'll have an opportunity to hear from a panel of a few people who have good experience in this, and we can ask them questions. And hopefully at the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions that you all may have for any of us who are participating here. My name is Sara Steenhouse. I am the pastor at Vallejo First Christian Church. And I am co-presenting today with Reverend Shannon Gomez, who is the pastor at the Christian Church of Woodland. And we have a third silent partner who helped us conceive of this workshop and kind of bring it to life, and that's Laura Jean Torgerson, who cannot be here this weekend, but is one of our collaborators. And I want to say we are not experts on this topic, but we are enthusiasts. And so we may rely on some of you for your own expertise or your own experiences to help kind of fill out what we have to offer today. You can go ahead and move forward to the next slide. I forgot I have to ask for that. All right, so that's us. That's me and Shannon and Laura Jean. And that's when we were all at the preaching retreat back in November with the Proclamation Project. So that was us. And there are a good number of you here. I think more than we maybe anticipated, which is wonderful. But I think if I pass the mic around and ask each of you to give us a lot of information about yourself, we may be here for too long. So why don't you turn to your neighbor in twos and threes, tell them your name, tell them what church or body of the church you're representing, and your pronouns, and why you chose to come to this workshop today. So your name, your pronouns, what part of the church you're in, and why you came today. They don't leave the workshop. Right. Yeah. All right, thank you for sharing. Hopefully you've had a chance to meet some of your neighbors. If you would go to the next slide, please. Thank you. We have Chon May back there helping us out. Thank you very much. Okay, what is open and affirming? I think a lot of you already know, but we've taken this definition from the experts at AllianceQ, and an open and affirming church strives to be welcoming. I'm going to read it in the tense it was written. Open and affirming churches strive to be welcoming places that welcome you, whatever your skin color, your accent, your clothing, the gender of your spouse. An O&A church seeks to welcome all the people without judgment and to provide a welcome that honors and accepts the diversity that is the image of God in creation. An O&A church works to ensure that when we say all are welcome, all are truly welcome. We're talking about the extravagant welcome of God's grace alive in our churches. And O&A often explicitly is referring to the LGBTQIA plus community, but also you can see in this definition, it's a bit broader than that in terms of extending God's welcome to all people. And an O&A church has typically gone through a discernment process, a decision-making process. They've made efforts to make their O&A status public so that they're sharing it in the community, and they are continually working in their efforts at inclusion. So we'll see a little bit more about that next. But if we go to our next slide, I just want to get back to real basics here. Which is that this is the alphabet soup that represents our queer community, and it's not always clear what all of the letters mean or who we're talking about. In fact, some people have different words that each of the letters kind of stands for. But from our point of view in presenting this today, LGBTQIA+ includes lesbian, gay, bisexual. I'm not sure this is actually working. Like, I'm just shouting. Is it? Okay. Okay. I just can't hear it. Okay. Okay. So I could probably talk quieter. Okay. Thanks. Thank you for checking in. All right. So a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, intersex, asexual, agender, aromantic. And then there's a plus because we know that we are continually learning new things about ourselves and continually welcoming more people into this larger community. And so there will be more. But basically, it's people who are not straight and who are not cisgender, right? And as I mentioned before, O&A is not just for queer people. It's an important place to start for reasons we'll see in a few minutes. But Open and Affirming stretches to include all variations of humanity because all people are made in the image of God. Amen. I love that. All right, the next slide, please. This introduces the organization called AllianceQ. I'm wearing one of their t-shirts today. And AllianceQ is the organization that represents and supports and advocates on behalf of LGBTQIA folks within the Disciples of Christ Church. And it has this beautiful history where in 1977, a woman from Idaho, Carol Blackley, boldly stepped up to the mic at a General Assembly in 1977, right? So this is like 50 years ago, nearly. And she spoke up to bring into public this thing that she was experiencing where her son was gay and nobody in the church would talk about it or recognize it. And she wanted to make space for him in our denomination and name it so that it could be a part of the conversation of the church. And so she called the disciples to name the reality that queer people are a part of our church and that we as a church can affirm them, our sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, parents, congregants, pastors, and staff. And from that time, out of that grew a conversation and an organization that was first called GLAD, Gay and Lesbian Affirming Disciples, which many of you I'm sure are familiar with. And they eventually, they had to start meeting, it sounds like in secret, right? It was not, to say that it was not welcomed openly in the church is a major that doesn't do it justice, right? It was very difficult for them to meet openly in the church. But in 1987, 10 years later, GLAD was formed from those folks meeting. And then by 2017, that transformed forward into the LGBTQ Alliance, which now we're calling AllianceQ. And you know, as time moves forward, we figure out new ways to support people and to offer resources to churches, and that is exactly what AllianceQ is doing. Their current executive director is Jermel Witherspoon, and it's a ministry of the church. It is not a general ministry of the church, but it is housed under the OGMP, which is the Office of the General Minister and President. So it is recognized now within our denomination. And it is guided by a leadership council. Two of the members have been great contributors here in our region. Bentley Stewart is a council member. Of course, he's moved, but Evan Stanfill also is serving and is still here in this region. And like I said, they provide support for congregations and resources and guides to help congregations go through the process of becoming open and affirming. And I have some materials to give to you before you leave in case you're interested in that or want to know what their website is and want to be able to look into that more for your own congregation. Here in our region, you can see, oh yeah, next slide, please. Here in our region, we were the first region to become open and accepting, which at the time was what could happen. And that came from a long, extended process of people working together to do Bible studies and listening sessions and discernment across the congregations of the region. In fact, Shannon and I found this folder, which is incredibly rich in resources. It says on the front, exploring responses to sexuality and homosexuality from and within the church, a resource guide for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ of Northern California, Nevada. And this is part of the resource that was distributed and used faithfully throughout the region before the decision in 1993 for our region to become open and affirming. Does that sound right? Did I get that right, folks who've been around? Yeah. So at that annual meeting in Asilomar, that decision was made. We were the first. And what that meant was that openly gay and lesbian or queer, transgender people coming to the region for ordination would be accepted if they met the other requirements, whereas in other regions, being openly out would be a disqualifying factor for ordination. And so one of the things that has made this region really rich in relationship across the church is how many folks who have come through here and to enter the gateway to ministry through us, because we opened it wide for them. About a quarter of our churches, our local churches, are open and affirming. Can you tell me which churches do you know of, O&A churches in our region? Geyserville, Concord here, Lafayette, First Sac, Vallejo, where I'm a pastor, Niles Discovery in Fremont, Ukiah is open and affirming. So I want you to, and Reading, oh yeah, is that the newest one? No, they've been for a while. I'm thinking of something else. And Eureka, thank you. And then by 2013, so there's a long distance between 1977 and 2013, but by 2013, our denomination at a General Assembly made a broad affirmation to include the LGBTQIA community in all aspects of Christian life within our church and affirming their ministry and presence and the gifts that they bring. Woo! Say that? Thank you. Yeah, Mayfair. Oh, great. I appreciate that. Thanks for the input. I should have mentioned we've got folks joining us on Zoom. So welcome to the folks who are further away, and thanks for being with us. Oh, awesome. Awesome. All right. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Okay. So why is this even important, right? What does it matter? Especially if you belong to an open and affirming church, it's been open and affirming for a while, and you kind of don't question. Maybe you have a queer pastor. Maybe, everyone that you love and value and looked up to is LGBTQIA in the church. But still, it matters to have the distinction of open and affirming, because there's a long history within Christianity of specifically excluding and harming LGBTQIA folks. There are scriptures in the Bible, 6 of them in particular, that have been used and interpreted to exclude the LGBTQIA community. There have been social norms that have been really powerful within the church, saying, telling us who's in, who's out. People have been excommunicated, expelled, sent away, denied membership. Or there has been sometimes a quiet policy of you can stay here as long as you're not too gay, a kind of a don't ask, don't tell. Or, I remember a family in my church growing up whose adult son was gay, and he would come, but he was never allowed in leadership positions. He was never invited to speak from the pulpit or read scripture or anything like that. It was okay that he was there, but we couldn't, he couldn't be a leader. So there's the history of that within our church. Also, churches have been kind of the leading factor behind conversion therapy in our country, which is thank you. It's sinful. It's a really painful way of trying to deny and suppress queerness within a person. And so for many people in the LGBTQIA community, the assumption is that churches are a place of harm or hiding, that if you want to be your true self, don't do it in a church. They will harm you. And so for those of us who have found what we believe are more faithful ways of interpreting those scriptures, or what we believe are better ways to include the wide family of God, it's really important to make that clear, because people are not going to find us otherwise, right? There is this assumption of exclusion by the queer community. If you would go to the next slide, please. Oftentimes, kind of the default thinking about church from the outside is that the folks inside are straight, they're cisgendered, they're able-bodied, they're English-speaking, they're mono-ethnic, which I think we could call our church a predominantly white institution, even though we have many churches from different traditions. We've got lots of Black churches, Hispanic churches, Korean churches, and the list goes on, but still we're predominantly white. We can assume from the outside most often that folks are monogamous, that they're middle class. So in order to make sure that people see themselves in our church, if they are not falling within the most common perception of who the church is, we need to make sure that they see themselves when they come to church by building spaces that are intentionally intergenerational, multi-ethnic, with a variety of types of bodies, with queer people. We need to state that we are open and affirming. We need to work on accessibility so that we can truly be welcome to all people. We're going to pivot here in just a second, but I think you get it, right? I think we get how important this is for folks. And in a few minutes, we'll hear from some panelists and hear a little bit more about some personal experiences. And the Open and Affirming name is not something that you just kind of slap on your church and go for it. There is a very intentional process that's laid out and been developed over many years to help churches get there. And all of the support and information for that are on the AllianceQ website, and their staff has been helping churches across our denomination in the US and Canada become open and affirming. If you follow their Facebook page, you'll see every few weeks there's another church celebrating that they have become open and affirming. And so there is that process, but we're going to kind of skip over the process for now. Again, we're not the experts on how to do it, but we do want to talk about, next slide, please. What are the marks? What are the signs of an open and affirming church? So you've gone through the process. You've become O&A, or you're thinking about becoming O&A. Can you see the future of your church in these ways? Now, the text is a little small, but number one is about consensus, right? Your ministry to become O&A has found consensus through formal process or a course of study in your life together, or you might have been founded as an O&A church from the start. So it might be in your founding documents, but that your church is committed to the mission of Open and Affirming Ministries. So you have consensus. Then the ministry has, in number two, confirmed this consensus by its founding documents or a congregational vote or a board vote. However your body makes decisions, that decision has been made and affirmed, and you've shared that information with the Open and Affirming Ministries program. And then the next step, number three, is to make a statement. So what statement can your church make that is written, that is official, that is accepted by the leadership of your church, affirming the welcome of persons of all gender expressions, sexual identities, welcoming all folks to the table of Christ's communion and to the full life and leadership of your congregation or ministry. The next slide has number 4. There's just 7, so we're getting there. Policy, okay, so this is starting to get to the places where you may not have thought of these next steps, but your ministry has in place policies concerning hiring and employment that encourage applications from persons of all gender expressions or sexual orientations, and that also provide equal protections and benefits to all applicants and employees. All right, number 5, public, right? So you've made this statement. Do you put it in the file drawer and let it sit there? No, you got to put it in your bulletin. You got to put it on your website. You got to make sure people are familiar with it in your congregation so they can represent it, interpret it, let people know that your church is O&A. You might make public signs on the front of your church. You might hang a flag. You might put a statement, but you want to be visible so that the folks who are deeply needing a spiritual home and don't know where to turn can find you. Number 6 is that it's continual. A mark of an O&A church is that it's continual. The ministry will continue to revisit, deepen its commitment to being a more inclusive community of faith. Would anyone say that their church, especially an O&A church, has got it all figured out and you welcome all people equally? Right? We all have so much to learn, and God is constantly giving us new opportunities to meet new people, to be better at becoming our full selves as we recognize the whole people who come to us, whoever they are. Right? It's transformative for us to continue to understand that we have space to grow and that we can still continue to widen our welcome. And then finally, you can tell AllianceQ came up with this budget. They want us to continue to support their ministry so that it can continue to grow and support more churches across the denomination. Okay, so How are we doing? Questions so far? Oh, great. Okay. So I would like to give our panelists an opportunity to come forward. If you help us go to the next slide, I will invite them to come up. I'm going to move this out of the way. And I think I'm going to pass this to Shannon.
Beautiful job, Sara. Come on, panelists. Okay, good morning, Reverend Shannon Gomez. I'm filling in as the third panelist because, things happen and we're human. I'm happy to be here with Larry Love and Tony Bynum. And so I'm going to facilitate the panel, but I'm also going to be a part of it. But just want to give Sara a little round of applause because very good job. Thank you for that. And thank you all for being here and the folks that are online with us too. So, want to give our panel humans here a chance to introduce yourselves more expansively than you did with the two or three people, even though people know us, I think. So, we're going to do name, church, role in ministry work, and experience with O&A. So I'll start since I'm on the mic. Shannon Gomez. I am the pastor at the Christian Church of Woodland for 10-ish months now. Role in ministry work. I'm the pastor. Experience with Open and Affirming. So I was a member and got ordained with the Vallejo Christian Church under leadership of Christy for a long time, and then Sara for a month or two, but we were members together for a while. And I came from Mission Gathering Charlotte, which was a church plant. So by default, the way they presented and were in community was as open and affirming. Now that I am the pastor at Christian Church of Woodland, so I'm queer, have a lovely wife. Christian Church of Woodland is not formally open and affirming, but by all intents and purposes of their hearts, minds, and souls, and how they are with one another in the community, they are. And we're working on the formality of it. So that's where I'll start. And Tony or Larry, you can take it away. Got your own.
Larry Love. I was born in Caldwell, Idaho, where a person that was at Treasure Valley Christian Church yet. It was First Christian Church. It was a church that had some disciples and independents in it, including my aunt. And a few times went to Sunday school there in a church in Caldwell. I have never been what you call hateful towards LGBTQ plus persons, and I thought I was being compassionate. But my journey was a 25-year journey to become open and affirming. But just through the years, it was kind of parts of the Methodist quadrilateral, scripture, reason, experience. Tradition really didn't play much of a part in it. But just as the years went by and I had experience with gay and lesbian and trans persons and saw their faith, and their commitment to Jesus Christ, that it was really hard for me not to embrace them fully as my sisters and brothers. I must admit that back in the late 80s, when I was at the pastor of Red Bluff, Corning, and Reading, there was a man in the church in Reading who wrote up a series of resolutions to the annual meeting at Assis Lamar saying that we would not ordain gay, lesbian persons. And I spoke in favor of those resolutions. And then in 1992, when the resolution first came to annual meeting, as it was called in those years, um, it it was delayed a year for the vote to give churches a chance to study, and so I I went back and thought I had to carry through on that commitment, and I wrote 3 different position papers. One a more conservative view, an open and affirming view, and kind of a middle of the road view. Wrote those papers about 10 pages each and passed them out to the congregation and had people come and think through on them. Um, but and also reading, when I was at Fuller Theological Seminary, my first quarter there, I attended Pasadena Covenant Church, and Mel White was the pastor there. And Mel had known from the time he was an adolescent that he was gay, but the churches in which he was involved did not allow for that. I loved his preaching, but this was before he came out. And I read his book, Stranger at the Gate. And that pretty much pushed me over the top. And then having been born as the regional minister here. And at Woodland, I had kind of pushed Woodland along to do the process and never seemed to really be able to get there. And when Kathy Wicks was the board chair, she said, well, let's just do this. And at a board meeting, she brought a motion that the church become open and affirming. The 10 members of the board voted unanimously to do so. But I'm sitting there going, but we've not done a congregational process. So I've left that for Shannon to clean up.
Thanks, Larry.
So I was at that General Assembly when Carol Blakely spoke. 1977. I actually paid my own way to go to General Assembly to make $11 a day to be an usher, which made no sense, but it was fun because I love General Assembly and I've been a church nerd since I was probably 6. And so the evolution of GLAD that I recall was from probably Mrs. Blakely made that very powerful address to the General Assembly. I heard tell of meetings in hotel rooms or clubs or somewhere. By 1981, GLAD had formed and met the night before General Assembly started in Louisville at a Presbyterian church in a more light, which was their Presbyterians' version of GLAD, kind of more light congregation. By the next assembly, I think GLAD, at some point, GLAD had a booth at General Assembly and buttons and people stopping by and picking up things. And up till now, with GLAD Alliance and being a recognized ministry of the church. So for me, it's really about persistence and being willing to be more and more visible, and claiming your stake, as other marginalized groups have done, claiming your stake in the church. Saying, not waiting for somebody to say you belong, but saying I belong. So that's kind of the relationship with GLAD and now AllianceQ. And I have to confess that I grew up in an era where queer was a pejorative term, and I still struggle with that a little bit. I don't object to it. It just strikes me differently than it does other generations. So thank you for reclaiming that term. I served a church that never took a vote to be open and affirming because we know who we are. We don't need to say anything about that. And so they never did, but they did do a study that came out, I want to say at the maybe in Kansas City in the late 90s, early 2000s, maybe 2001, whichever assembly that Sweet Honey and the Rock came, which was for the first time. So there was this whole study that was introduced at that assembly that my congregation did. And again, wouldn't take a vote because we know who we are, but this is also a church that wouldn't put signs on the inside because we know where everything is. So, and we can tell people that are wandering around the Sunday school classrooms where the sanctuary is. We don't need signage for that. And let me, as I say that, that church doesn't exist anymore. It closed 2 years after I left, but these were really lovely people who cared deeply for one another and cared very deeply for me, except for the ones who didn't, which is why I left. So, and that always that's not unusual. All of that is to say, I think that there is making a public declaration, which I encourage them to do, and at the same time living the declaration. And this was a congregation that lived it. We had two women come to the church with their little girl. I don't remember their names, but their daughter's name was Ingrid Margaret Singleton Tarr, which I think is the most lyrical name I have ever heard, and should be the first line of a book, a children's book about something, because it's such a lovely name. And so I think the challenge is, the tension is in, do we live as who we are without saying who we are? Without making a vote, without making a declaration, without putting out a press conference or putting on your website that you're an open and affirming congregation. And I think the barrier, people don't do that because we continue to have concerns about how other churches will see us. What about the conservative church, which we have nothing to do with anyway, but what about them? Maybe people will stay away. We don't want people to be concerned for their children. And these are things people, say out loud. And I think the one that makes sense in this time is, will we be safe if we do? I think that's a legitimate concern. And I think the last thing I want to say is, but if you feel led, if you've done the study,
Are you answering the questions?
Yeah.
All of them? Oh, yeah, I was.
Doing all of them, so.
Oh,
sorry. Okay,
it's okay.
I'll stop. I thought
Thank
this was
you.
hilarious, but anyway,
Oh, well,
sorry.
no, it's okay. So for the audience, too, so you can hear. The second question is, what are some joys and blessings of having an open and affirming ministry?
I made notes. One of them is more diversity in the church, and which I always count as a gift. The church is blessed with the gifts, the abilities, the gifts, including spiritual gifts, of those LGBTQ plus persons, the gifts that they bring to the church. And if LGBTQ plus people come to the church that has done church, which general has done harm to them, then you know that they are people seeking God, are enamored with Jesus, are deeply spiritual, and they want to express that spirituality in community. And folk like that are always a blessing to the church. Also, a congregation increases its compassion as it opens its doors to more and more people who are seeking belonging and community. And it's always better when there is more compassion in the life of a congregation.
Ask a question because I think it's a wonderful thing that
We will have a Q&A time if it can hold, but
we need a.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you didn't want me to talk.
If you can.
No. I'm just, so I'm thinking of the fact that, we do this and we say this and we want to be this. But that we are, we're churches that like our people, are they, it's not so much going out to find people, but how are people talking about their church in their community that will possibly allow someone that has either been harmed or is seeking to know that they're there. We don't open the doors of our churches at the end. We do our benediction. Well, I don't know. Some people do, but inviting, if there is a guest, and inviting them to come and be a part, right? Like, how are we expressing that in the community? Even if you go through all the steps and you do all the things, but you're not attracted, you're there, right? You're just there. And no one knows that you're there. And I understand the fear aspect of saying, putting yourself out there. But geez, isn't that what Jesus did for the world?
thank you. I think that speaks to a bigger church issue for the disciples as a whole, not just necessarily the open and affirming churches. But how do people find us? I think we have the best news in town, right? I mean, not to bash, but compared to some other spaces, I think disciples really live into what they believe or try to. They do their very best. They're hospitable. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to that. We will have a separate time for Q&A though. Do you want to speak any more to joys and blessings?
I think just being receptive to people, part of this will answer your question. And I mean, I think the joy is just to say we welcome everybody and to mean it. Because I don't know any, I've never encountered a congregation, and I've been to a lot of them, where they will say we are the most unfriendly, inhospitable congregation in town. No congregation says that. So then how do we live that? So if we welcome somebody walks in that we perceive to be part of the spectrum that we've talked about today, do we get real formal, or do we just say, I'm so glad you're here today? and here's a bulletin, and here's somebody who will sit with you. And here is some, and we're having potluck after church, and we hope that you will stay. And we'd love to have information because we want to reach out to you to let you know what our ministries are, because we'd love to have you come back. That's what people are looking for. And then to say that and to mean it. I'm glad you're here. This might not be the church for you.
I've never encountered that.
Well, I've not encountered that literally, but body language is really powerful.
Yeah.
And so I think it's to mean what we say what we mean, and live that out. Is there anybody here from Selma? So early in my ministry here, I preached at Selma, and this gay couple came to church. I couldn't tell you what my sermon was, and it probably had nothing to do with the sermon, but a lot to do with the welcome. They're still at that church. They became members of that congregation. They are leaders in that congregation because they walked in with some church hurt from another place, and were welcomed, found a place of welcome and safety and hospitality.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, I have a gay gentleman who's been coming to my church, and he's like, I don't need rainbow cupcakes. I just want to like be a part of community, you know? And I want to add to that for folks who left the church because of childhood trauma, religious trauma. They've been hurt by the church, those types of things. To me, it's a real joy and blessing seeing them come back to a space where they are fully loved, welcome, and seen. Because a lot of times what happens is when you do get that church hurt, it also goes with God is bad. I'll give up on God, give up on my faith. You know, God doesn't love me. I don't want anything to do with that. And when people come back and they take that risk, just like Larry very much said, they're deeply seeking something. They're deeply seeking that connection with the divine. And I think that's a beautiful blessing and joy. All right. I should have printed it out like y'all, but in millennial fashion. Oh, okay. I'm working to get there. You saw it? Oh, okay. All good. What challenges or tensions can come with being an open and affirming congregation or ministry?
One of them is moving from saying that you are welcoming to saying that you are affirming. And that welcome gets said a lot, but oftentimes it does not mean fully affirming. Well, I think somebody said it before. You can come to church here, and we are glad to have you, but we're not going to make you an elder. You're not going to teach Sunday school. You're not going to work with the youth group, which really isn't welcoming. Real welcoming is affirming, but the way it gets said in churches is it instead of me be welcoming and affirming. Yeah. 4 years ago at annual gathering, I was on a panel about what we'd learned in seminary, and there was a person came up to me afterwards and kind of hung with me all through annual gathering, talking about her journey and ate meals with me all the time. And she was the pastor of a church called Live on Purpose Community Church that met at the Vacaville Church. And I realized they worship on Sunday evening. So I invited Aaron Edwards, to come and preach when I was on vacation. And when a junior high student told her mom, I need to be there next Sunday to hear her again, even though the mom wasn't going to be around, they insisted on grandma bringing her. I thought, this is somebody who we ought to grab hold of. And so we hired Aaron as my co-pastor in September of that year. But one of the things that I became aware of in that, even though we had those signs out there that said everybody was welcome, there were people who were uneasy with Aaron. And Aaron is a personality that just kind of blows on through that. But there are others who, when they show up, if they, I think a lot of gay, lesbian, and trans persons pick up even one person who is not open to their presence there. And so it is really important that this becomes something that the whole congregation embraces, because one person can make a person think this is not a safe place for me. So that's one of the challenges, is to make sure that happens. It's also a reality that the conservative churches in the community are not going to want to come and do the community Thanksgiving service with you. And that's just one of the things that you need to be okay with. And it's important to keep this commitment out there in the open. Sophia, I think, mentioned this a little bit ago, that you've got with the congregation, you've got to continue with that here's who we are, here's who we are, here's who we are. And because it is way too easy to just pass the resolution in a congregational meeting and wave goodbye to the 9 people who walked out right after the vote, which was the case of the church I currently worship at, St. John's United Church of Christ. But they have to keep this before them. And like, Sophia, were you in your comments, were you saying that they need, when they talk about their church out in the community, they need to talk about that commitment that they've made? So it just needs to be something that is kept before the congregation.
Thank you, Larry. I am aware of our time. I want to leave roughly 15 minutes for you all to ask questions if you like. We'll go to question 5, which is, what would you say to a congregation that is considering becoming open and affirming, but they feel nervous about taking that next step?
I would say go through the process and decide. Do the study, do the personal discernment, and then make a decision about whether or not that is the right thing for you. And this answers a little bit of the previous question. And then if your decision is yes, then make sure, and you've got a mission statement, build that in, rewrite your mission statement to include that you're open and affirming. Repeat your mission statement, if congregations still do that, at the beginning of worship every Sunday. Put it on the screen as worship is beginning. Put it on your website because the person looking is going to want to know that. And for preachers in the room, preach about inclusivity. Preach about places and people who have been harmed. Preach about ways that you have been strengthened by being open and affirming. If you believe that God calls each of us, loves each of us, created each of us, that's pretty basic. That's pretty basic preaching stuff, and we need to see that.
To become open and affirming is to be a good news church. You may be aware that the beginning of the book of Acts, the gospel jumps barrier after barrier after barrier after barrier, including first Hellenistic Jews and then Samaritans who were deeply, deeply, deeply despised. And then you get that Ethiopian eunuch, a person differently sexed, included in. And then Peter has to have this whole vision thing to get him to go to Cornelius's home, a Roman army captain. And so including is repeated so much there in the early chapters of Acts. So it is being a New Testament good news church when we open ourselves to LGBTQ plus persons. And to fail to take this step is preventing your church from getting to know some wonderful, loving people who bring gifts to the life of the church. And there are persons out there who are just aching to be a part of a loving, accepting congregation. Love God, they're enamored with Jesus, a deep spirituality, and you can give them a place to belong and a place of acceptance. And if you get smaller as a result of becoming an open and affirming congregation, remember that the church at its best is a remnant people. A small group without seemingly much power or much to offer, but God takes small groups and makes a difference. Remember, you've probably heard anthropologist Margaret Mead once said, "Do not doubt the ability of a small group of people to change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So if we become something of a remnant congregation because of becoming open and affirming, you're going to be used of God.
All right. All right.
Some reason I had that put in my head. I don't remember where about that.
And I just want, I can say this very quickly, that we disciples, you know, we're a non-creedal church, but we have a lot of slogans. And one of the ones of late is that we are a movement for wholeness in a fragmented world. And I think what we do with that is, yes, that's another way of saying we're a church just steeped in unity. But it's also, for me, a confessional statement, because then we have to own the places where we have created or contributed to fragmentation. And then once we do that, we can become a reconciled church. So that's one. The other one is our general minister and president has written a book called Staying at the Table. Has challenged us to be the church we say we are. And part of being is doing and kind of living out loud who we say we are. So if we are an open and affirming congregation in an open and affirming region, which Indiana is now as well, and I think maybe Kansas, or Greater Kansas City, one of those. Then let's be who we say we are.
Was the Northeast region at one point?
I don't think the Northeast region was. Northwest region may have been, but
Okay, we'll head to Q&A soon, but I want to say one thing because our church is in the process of this right now. And so for leaders that are in this room, whether you're a pastor or just a lay human at your church, when you come to this work, no matter what you feel in your heart and soul, obviously I want Woodland to be open and affirming, but I have to come to that table with the wisdom that this truly is the church's decision. They truly have to make that decision. And whether it goes the way I want or it doesn't go the way that I want, I can make my own. I'm an adult. I can make decisions from that after that. But you really have to pray into them and encourage them to do the hard work to figure out what is best for that church space and that church community. And something I love about our committee and when we get around the table, they're very aware of we do need to hear all perspectives, all voices in the room. We need to approach this work with a lot of compassion. Maybe not everybody agrees who's sitting in the pews. Maybe they do. We really don't know. But you do have to approach it in a way where you're not leaning one way or the other. In my opinion, I think that's the faithful way to do this work.
So I think we're ready to transition to Q&A. And so if panel members, if you would stay up here to help be our experts in this, but can we give them a round of applause for their wisdom and vulnerability and preaching we heard? That was wonderful. Thank you for participating. I think if you have questions, Shannon might come around with a mic. I'm going to pass out these I'm going to pass these things out for you all. It includes a couple of flyers from AllianceQ. One of them didn't print very well, but it still has good information, so I'm going to give it to you anyway. And this also includes the evaluation, and if you wouldn't mind, please returning them to regional staff member after you, or particularly Monica, if you have a chance when the workshop's over. One other thing I wanted to say is that if your congregation is currently open and affirming, double check on the map on the AllianceQ website, because there were a couple of churches from our region that I thought I would find on their website that were not there. And I think it's just a matter of communication and letting them know. So if you want to be sure that folks can find you when they go to the thing and they type in their zip code and they say, what's the nearest O&A church to where I live, or where can I visit when I'm out of town or whatever, make sure you're listed there and they'll help you get that done.
Yeah, I think Sarah touched a bit on it, but yes, you need to continue. Part of being open and affirming is it's not a finish line. You need to continually work towards it. You need to continually show up in community. You need to continually practice using correct pronouns. You need to get your documents and bylaws in order so that they represent all types of folks who may be in your church. I don't know, some other things. Yeah, that y'all know what we're saying. I see other hands. Did you still want to ask a question, Mary? Okay. Oh, yes.
Just keep the mic and just repeat the question we hear. On Zoom, they can't hear the question unless it's through the mic. You just repeat the question and answer it, you'll be fine. Just hand the mics up there.
Okay. I'm actually terrible at repeating back, so I'm gonna let them ask. Thank you. Thank you.
This is kind of related to what y'all were just saying. I love the continual piece because it doesn't end after the vote, partly because we keep learning new things, right? And especially thinking about the name change from the gay lesbian affirming to the AllianceQ that's more fulsome. I feel like I'd wager to say that if your church went through the process more than 10 years ago, the process probably didn't include a lot of work on trans issues. And so I'm wondering, and the best thing about AllianceQ and the work that they do is the sort of accountability that goes into. You can't just slap O&A on your website. But what is the accountability for the continual piece? How do we know that churches are continuing to do the work? And like, if I'm somebody on the website looking at that map, how do I know if this church has been O&A for 15 years that they respect pronouns? You know, is there any kind of process around that?
There is not a process that I'm aware of. That is a very good question. And perhaps that's something that could be brought to Reverend Jamel, I don't know, 5 to 10 year, like, let's touch base, yeah. Let's see how things are going. It's a really good point. Yeah. Shannon.
Well, this is a question kind of like, I just want to see how you guys feel about it, but I felt so strongly about semi-responding to what Sophia said as well, is that this isn't just about getting people in the doors. This is talking to your whole community. Our church moved from very quietly saying that we were open and affirming to actually putting it in our bulletins and on our policies and on our documents, to making the decision to fly a flag outside. And when I first saw them do that, I'm like, that's so performative. Why are we doing that? But we are making such a conversational point to our community. People will slow down, honk, and yell, thank you. People will come out and take pictures under our flags. The kids at the school where I work ask why we do that, and businesses come in. So even though most of these people will never step foot in our doors unless we're offering food, we're normalizing these kind of open spaces for people in a very small rural town that was very alarmed to see that flag go up in the first place.
Thank you, Shannon.
One of the things about the continuing is you need to make sure when people start coming to the church that they know that you have taken this stand. I don't think there's anybody on Zoom from St. John's, but since they did the vote, there have been several extended Fijian families who have joined the church, and they are half of the congregation on a Sunday morning. And as the church is in a search and call process, all of a sudden I'm starting to hear talk that some of the Fijian families might leave if you hire a gay minister. And so I very quickly set up a meeting, and I'm not in any position. I'm pulpit supply. I teach their Bible study. I'm not in an official position with them, but I grabbed I grabbed the president of the congregation and the former pastor, who is a good friend, and had lunch. And I said, has this been shared with new people, and especially the Fijian community? Yeah. So, it's a little bit of an area now of concern within the congregation.
So in this region, if there is a congregation that is interested in being open affirming, is there, are you it? Are you the person, the people who we get in touch with first? Or do we go directly to headquarters or what? Headquarters.
I would be happy to journey alongside you collegially, but I'll probably also point you to AllianceQ. But I'm happy to help in the process and whatever.
I mean, I'll just say, I think a lot of people will be willing to help, like guest preach and stuff like that, or lead a Bible study. I mean, whenever I see a new church, it's usually such a long process that they will invite people from all kinds of O&A churches around to come and, yeah, guest preach or lead a Bible study, or, yeah, I think any of these people and me and probably lots of other people would be willing to help with that kind of stuff.
It's been a while since I was very active with AllianceQ, so I don't know how it's shaped right now. But they used to have like a regional kind of group that supported as well. Hopefully that's still happening. It's not, maybe I need to get back over there.
Yeah, I'm not familiar necessarily with that, but that's a good idea.
I would just share, Tony brought up fear in terms of as a legitimate kind of fear of safety is a legitimate concern about being an open and affirming church kind of in this climate. And I will say that on a Sunday morning in January this year, we had a young man approach our church, Bible in hand, asking about kind of the flags and the rainbows on the front of our church. And I said, yeah, that means we're open and affirming. Does that match with your beliefs? So, you know, that's what we're here for. Come on in. And he was not a good actor. He came with the intention of really arguing and disrupting our service. And I spoke to him for a while. I talked to him about our view of scripture. I offered to pray with him. He wasn't very happy about that. And eventually I had to start worship and lead worship. And we had a couple of lay members who are not members of the LGBTQIA community step outside with him and just faithfully reflect back to him, well, what we believe here is Jesus' love. What we believe here is that all people are welcome. And, you know, we could still hear him out there by the time we got through the first half of worship. And by prayer time, all of us inside were praying for him and praying for our members who were with him. And so I don't consider that a moment of unsafety necessarily. He didn't come to do physical violence, but there was some spiritual violence in what he did. And my concern was for our members or visitors who might hear what he had to say and be harmed by it. But I will say, rather than making us feel like maybe we shouldn't be so public, it actually reconfirmed for all of us that we are doing what we're called to do by being a place of sanctuary and a sacred community for all people, and because it is so needed where we are. So it's not out of the question. It does happen. And thankfully on that morning, we were equipped to deal with it in a way that felt faithful and holy, and that like, you know, we're still okay.
Thank you. What I really in my journey has been impressed with is a work that folks are willing to do to live out radically inclusive hospitality. It's not easy, right? It's hella hard. Yet for me, and what I've discovered in my journey, many folks doing that hard work. So that when you do come up against just plain outright hateful stuff, you know, you're not coming from a place where you don't have the depth of faith to engage it. And that a lot of that work is not being done clearly as we see. But I think what's been helpful too is when we go into the process, I'm always mindful, I think, an act where God added daily to the church. So God has somebody come into your church that you may not have a clue to understand, but God does that. So God invites us to be a home for refugees, for immigrants, for many people. And then the other part is God always makes a way. And you could be the way in the middle of some rough times, for such a time as this, as they say. And then finally, and this idea of salvation, right? Okay, we get Jesus as our Savior, but salvation really does come down to the congregation. But a lot of folks, particularly in the trans community, just that particular community, I mean, they may be thinking about suicide. And that one spark of hospitality to say, I welcome you and I see you, that's salvation. So these things have to be in place as we think about open and affirming. It's not just something you do to be cool and progressive. It's about saving people's lives. It's about living out the good news in such a way that those youth I saw and talked to in El Cerrito High School and say, yes, I want to be a disciple because they care and they see me. But the work has to be beyond just on a paper. It's got to be right there in the soul.
Absolutely. Thank you, Monica.
I,
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I just wanted to make a remark. When our church first became Open and Affirming, what they did was it was just LGB. And I want to go through, because at a church I was at in Illinois, I headed the whole thing to go LGBTQ, well, you know, the whole Open and Affirming thing. And so now we have, who is my wife, have a transgender minister, and she's not even included in the Open and Affirming, you know. So we want to go through the whole thing again, and you have to go through the whole policy. One of the other things I wanted to remark on is you were talking about the safety. We have had a banner out front. I mean, if you go by our church, you'll see the banner. It's right up front. It's different banners. We rotate them. One is love your neighbor. One is LGBTQ, you know, one is transgender. One is Black Lives Matter. And there's a few others, but we've had so many of our banners sliced up, cut up, and destroyed that we still just get more. In fact, one time, the community itself, people that don't even come to our church, donated money so that we could get more banners. There's a company not far from us that makes banners. They made us 3 different banners because our banners were being destroyed. So I just wish some of these people who were helping us get the banners would also come to church. But what I was going to say is that I'm glad you gave this information out because I need to know how to get more information about going through the process again. So thank you very, very much for this today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Pastor Stephen here said he will take the heat for going over, and then we're going to close, I promise.
Just real quick. So one of the tensions I have is that we operate in gender binaries and have that structured in our denominational, regional structures, men's ministries, women's ministries. And I've had a hard time as a pastor trying to get beyond just thinking in terms of men and women's ministries and trying to find non-gendered spaces that's more inclusive. We need to move forward somewhere, changing our structures of our church to get beyond those gendered binaries that are so deeply entrenched. I just feel we're not making progress. I wonder what movement there is or how we hold that tension or where we move forward in that. So
I'll be the bureaucrat here and say that I want you to be free to begin to create those, to model those, because we don't know how to do them. But we will watch and take from that. Become the example of that. I think, I mean, what I've said and will continue to say, that I think there's a need for women's groups and men's groups. I think those are unique sets of folks who have different issues and are not always comfortable in each other's spaces. But I also want there to be a third way, another way, a different way, so that for people who are willing to become comfortable in a different space.
And maybe there can be a space for people like me who don't fit in those spots.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That, people make those decisions, and I certainly would support that. And I know other people would as well. I think we've not seen it in a way that you've described it, Steve. And so, and every time I mention it, to say, I'm hearing people ask for a third way, and that doesn't seem like the right thing to say. I find some different language, but something in addition to men's groups and women's groups.
Another affinity group.
Yeah, another affinity group, exactly. And nobody has said, oh, no, we can't do that. It's got to be this and this. Maybe we need youth groups that are for grown-up people that tend to find leadership from from young men and young women and young non-binary folks. Because a lot of us came to leadership that way in the church. Mm-hmm. And so it is, I think everything's possible. I think we just need to imagine and begin to live out that thing that we're imagining. Yeah.
Yeah, the Gen Z are not going to men's groups and women's.
No, they're not. They're not.
So I think you're right. Need for that, and I think that needs faded and generationally is going to change.
It will change over time. But for people to go through a different thing, to find a different way, they've got to see it and they've got to see value in it. They've got to know it's got meaning for them. And for me, it's important to say that it's not replaced. Let what has been traditional men's and women's groups, if they're going to die out, they're going to die out. That will take care of itself.
It's so entrenched, though.
Well, so what? So what, Steve? Let them be entrenched.
Well, but the thing is, I often thought that was in putting together women's events for WOSA.
Yeah.
Like, why can't we invite the
Yeah.
guys along too? And it's not so much, I'm old.
The same thing. I had a men's group in Burbank years and years ago.
Yeah.
And there's a woman in the church who's like, that's the only night I can come to Bible study. Can I come join you?
Yeah.
No, of course you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, that's not a men's
That's
group.
how it's so.
Let's just call it something.
Right.
But it's so institutionally entrenched.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Like a men's group.
It is.
Well,
And I'm just like, so what? And I want to talk to you after, because I
the men's ministry bank account.
All right.
so
We're getting
there's
into it.
there's also a youth bank account, and there's a national convocation that's going to meet next month, and there's NAPAD that met last.
Sounds like
But met, and there's an Oprah Hispano group that meets.
we need a cats and coffee group.
People
Okay.
get to form affinity groups. We get to do that in the church.
We're all leaders.
And
We can
let's
create it.
the table is huge. So let's just keep making room for groups that want to form. And that's how change comes.
All right.
That's
Gonna honor our time. It is 11:20. Put all the heat on this, gentlemen. So Sarah
that's what I want to say.
and now Tony.
This is about patriarchy. This is about, for me, it's about you as a white man saying these groups shouldn't exist.
That's how I thought.
And well, I received that. I received that. But refusing to hear or being reluctant to hear that there is room for all kinds of groups in this church. That's all I'm trying to say. That there's room for all of these groups in the church.
And I apologize if I came across that way. You asked a question, why can't we just go to affinity groups? I'm like, well, there's two affinity groups that are embodied in the institutional structure.
Right.
That the new groups don't have access to.
No,
resources, money.
Right.
That's all my.
Yeah, and we just had a whole conversation that AllianceQ is a recognized ministry in the church. 40 years ago, they were meeting in other churches' basements, but they kept meeting and they kept advocating and they kept doing the work that they need to do. And here we are having this conversation.
So I'm going to be clear, like, as a white privileged male access to ministry money, I think they should recognize their privilege, their institutional structure, and use some of their funds to help create other affinity groups.
I don't object to that at all.
That
And
We need to honor the time. I'm so sorry.
and talk to the Korean man that's in charge of that.
Sarah and I wanted to lift up that we are working with Reverend Jermel from AllianceQ to hopefully sometime in the fall have a gathering to celebrate churches in our region that are open and affirming, to do some educational work and just fellowship and be together. So be on the lookout for those things. Thank you so much for being here. And if it's okay, I'll pray us out. Divine Creator, we come to you this day. We're thankful for the thoughtfulness. We're thankful for the minds and hearts that exist on Zoom and in this space today. Thank you for helping us to be here, helping us to open our hearts, helping us to hear, helping us to learn a little something. We pray that we go out to our churches and we go out to our communities and our world, and we help to build God's table wider. We honor and we value all that each of your children bring, God. Help us to continue to see folks, to continue to be with them, to continue to journey and love them and ourselves, God. We thank you for the faithful work of this region, the faithful work of this church, and all the people who exist here. And we lift these things in Jesus' name. Amen.